Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Zach. Here we talk about overlanding, gear, builds, DIY, all sorts of stuff related to modifying your vehicle. Today we're going to be talking about a modification that a lot of people consider doing to their vehicle. I've done this on my 4Runner and now I'm doing it to my Land Cruiser, and that is ditch lights. Ditch lights are pretty handy because if you're somewhere in a remote area and you want to see past sort of the field of view of your headlights, these come in really handy. And installing these though is not quite so simple on the Land Cruiser compared to the 4Runner, and that's what I kind of walk through / show you how I'm installing these on my Land Cruiser. So on the 4Runner typically, or Tacoma, whatever, most vehicles are this way. There's a big vented region kind of underneath your windshield wipers, which allow you to access the bolts for your hood hinges, and people double up on those hinges and just use those bolts for ditch brackets. And they work pretty well, and they just, I think, kind of depress / pinch inside of either the weather seal or the plastic, whatever it is. Unfortunately, on the Land Cruiser, there's like 4 panels or 3 panels that all marry up nice and clean right under the windshield, which looks fairly good, or at least gives off kind of an interesting look. I'm not really partial one way or the other, but it makes for mounting up ditch lights quite challenging. So today I'm going to be installing the YodaTech ditch brackets. These come specifically for the Land Cruiser because they're going to be mounted underneath the mirrors. So I'm going to kind of show you the process of installing these brackets. I'm also going to be replacing my mirrors at the same time. I'll link everything I can think of down below to what I used in this video, and hopefully that'll maybe help you out, or at least help you on the process of putting ditch lights on your 80 series Land Cruiser. So with that being said, we'll talk a little bit about kind of the products and the install, and then I'll show you at the very end sort of how it turns out. So stay tuned, but yeah, this is going to be a little bit of a difficult install, but it's not impossible, and it just takes a few little tips and tricks here along the way to really make it turn out quite clean. So if you are wondering, I also did this install on Black Hills Builds, or Wes's 80 series Land Cruiser, kind of a year or 2 ago, and that's kind of how I got this idea for how to do this. So all right, with that being said, let's jump into the install. We are going to start working on the ditch lights here. So the ditch light bracket will go right underneath the mirror here, and this mirror, as you can tell, completely broken and kind of just junky, and I don't like the chrome. So we're putting new mirrors on, and we have to route the wires through the door because the hood here is like a nice little, seam with the body panels. It's not a vented plastic area like some newer vehicles. So we got to start taking door panels off, and at the same time we'll put on some new mirrors. All right, so there's a plastic piece right up here where the mirror bolts in. We're going to pop that out, and then we're also going to pull out the screw right in here. This piece pops forward and then pulls out, and so we can remove this. And then down here, this armrest, if you put a pry tool right under here, this will pop off, and we've got a screw there and a screw there to remove. Once we pop those off, there should just be clips on the bottom here, and then we'll need to unplug this light, and we will be good to go for getting this door panel popped off. Okay, so now I removed these 3 screws here to remove the actual mirror, and what we're going to do is we're trying to get access to this area on the door. So this has 2 bolts on it. You pull those out. We're going to pull this plastic liner out of the way. You got to tear off some of this butyl stuff. I've got this red tape that you use for poly like this as a moisture barrier on a house, and I'm going to use that to try and kind of patch this afterward. So the goal is to route our wire up inside of here, and we can put some zip ties on this bar to try and keep our wire away from actually hitting the window when you put it up and down. So that's kind of the goal, is we'll route our ditch light wire right in there. Okay, so I've got my new mirror here, and what we're going to do is we're going to mount the light up front. But we got to get space to route this wire in through the door. So I've used a pencil to mark like a half circle on this plastic piece on the inside, and that will allow us to route the wire through underneath and then come out next to here through this sort of rubber insert next to the other wiring harness. As you can see, there's a little gap right there. We can push it through this rubber divider piece and then
we can route it in through this area that we're going to cut out. So we remove this little Phillips screw, and that allows us to take this plastic piece off and we can drill a hole. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so what I'm doing is I'm starting to prep this, and I'm actually making these harnesses a little bit different. And I don't know why I haven't done this from the get-go, but they provide these Deutsch connectors with every diode light you order. And what I have done in the past is, you know, sometimes I've soldered them, which is, I guess, heavily discouraged because solder can break apart, and I guess it'll break around the solder joint due to vibrations. And then some people use these, you know, female to female sort of end connectors like this for, you know, 14 or 16 gauge or whatever. But in a perfect world, you just reuse this. So I got the tools. This, you know, would look to be like a highly rated tool on Amazon, this eye crimp. And then I bought a little teeny Deutsch connector tool, which was pretty cheap, just some random brand. But honestly, I think a small flathead screwdriver would do the job for this. And then I bought some male and female pins to use in these connectors. So you need the 14 to 16 gauge pins. I'll put that all in the description. But what you do is you pull off this little rubber seal here, and you can pull the cap out the end and pop each one of the pins out, and then this just pulls right out of the connector, and we've got it right here. So now what I'm going to do is reinstall these 3 wires with my 14-3 jacketed wire I have here, and then there will just be less connections to fail. So I've got these here. I'm going to kind of crimp them all, do everything how I need to, and we should be good to go. So now what you do is I've left this one assembled so you know which pins go to which locations. So it's, you know, the red, black, and blue, and then I've done that accordingly here with the white, black, and green. So everything is sort of oriented correctly, and you can see that the 3 pins are at the end of this connector. Now we'll put the wedge at this end so they can't pop out, and we'll put this sealing cap on the back so that it's moisture and waterproof. Okay, so I've tried to lay this out how I'm kind of prepping it all. So we've got the light on here, we've bolted it down. Note that there is like a square sort of carriage bolt nature to this bolt, so I put it in a spot where the slide had actually a circle so that I could pivot it. So the bolt isn't centered right now, but the light doesn't move at all. We're gonna loop this into this hole here, because this is what I've done for routing this wire. We've drilled a larger hole through here. I think this is 5/16, but whatever size this harness is needs to be drilled out there. Then we route both wires through this rubber kind of washer sort of spacer between this metal bracket for the actual light, and then this will pinch right underneath here. So all of this will now route through this opening. That's kind of the order, but once we kind of get this sorted, I'm going to put the actual cap on here. So it's a bit tricky to kind of get everything set up and routed, but I wanted to just show you that quick before I actually install it on the vehicle. All right, so there we go. Got the wire routed and kind of tucked up underneath the bracket. It's a little bit tricky. If you get this perfect, you can kind of wrap it through there and down through here. These diode dynamic lights have a backlight, so there's 3 wires in here. If there's 2 wires in here, probably be a little bit easier to route this, but it is what it is. I might drill this hole even a little bit bigger for the passenger side, but this really doesn't look too bad either. So this is all routed. Now we'll just hook this all up to the vehicle and start routing this wire to the engine bay. Well, there you have it. See how clean that mounts up? I mean, you can see the little bit of electrical behind the light, but that's just fine. So there we go. And then underneath, not too bad. I mean, this bolt you can see way easier than the actual wire harness. So yeah, I like this. Still got to tighten everything down so I've got the right angle I like. If we come in on the inside here, I actually kind of completely forgot how I did this on Wes's Land Cruiser, Black Hills Builds, but this you can all leave. So thankfully on the passenger side, I'll save myself some work. We take out the speaker, and this gives us tons of access. So unplugging the old mirror is kind of a pain. There's a clip like up inside the door here that you can kind of mess around with, or you could just rip the harness off. Just kind of depends on what you want to do. I got this is my massive harness here that I've kind of mocked up that will go to the Switch Pros. So it goes down through there and then comes out the door harness here. If we kind of zoom in, if I can give you a decent angle here. Funny enough, the top of that boot was actually ripped already, so I'm routing it out of there, and then I'll zip tie it to that really close to this grommet that goes into the vehicle. But instead of going into the vehicle, I'm going to go up into the fender because the space in the fender goes straight to the engine bay. So we can zip tie everything and we can route it right through that cavity there and then start zip tying it to stuff coming across the engine bay. So we'll come across the engine bay here, and then I'll route it to my Switch Pros and hook it up right here. So should work out pretty easy. We just gotta actually do it and then do the whole thing again on the passenger side.
All right, well, that's gonna wrap up the install. I just wanted to showcase this. Huge shout out to Yoda Tech for sending these ditch brackets my way. It really helped me out to make this video, and I wanted to showcase kind of how I did this because it's a little bit intricate and it takes a little bit of design to kind of put together this approach, and so I thought it was kind of novel to show this. So I can't think of any reasons why routing it this way would be a bad reason. All the sharp edges that I can think of are either through some sort of rubber grommet or they don't ever come in contact with the wires. I try to zip tie them tight so they're not like dangling or shaking or bouncing around. So as far as I can tell, I think this is a good approach, but if you think that there's something dumb that I did here, please comment that down below so that I can kind of think that through and maybe adjust my approach. So I appreciate all the support from you. If you've got any feedback for me, you got questions, whatever, feel free to leave them down below and I'll try to get them. And I'll try to get to them. So thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.